Hello and welcome everybody. This is Grandmaster Sam Shankland, and today I'd like to continue my series on games I played at the World Open. So I'm actually going to cover two games in this video because both of them were really, really fast. Now, I've never been one to just crush people, but somehow I played two IMs, both of whom were under 2400, so quite a bit lower than me, who I was expecting to beat. I had white in both cases. But I had never just crushed anybody like this. I wouldn't even say I crushed them. They sort of killed themselves. Now, I think this happened because I was able to put pressure on them and make them make mistakes in ways that they normally wouldn't. Without further ado, we're going to look at the games and sort of figure out how mistakes can happen. So here, I'm playing white. I played d4, and my opponent plays the Dutch. And I played e3, which is, I'm sure, not the best move, but I was just looking to get a position. Knight f6, bishop d3, e6, knight f3, d5. So we end up in sort of a stonewall-like position. And here I actually found a very tricky move. I know it's sort of weird to be talking about being out of theory and finding tricky moves on move 5, but I found a move that I thought really was working well. So if white were to play c4 after c6, let's say, we have a very standard-looking stonewall, which, I mean, in my opinion, should be a little better for white, but it's nothing that abnormal. I know that the setup with e3, bishop d3 is recommended in Boris Avruk's series, which I'd highly recommend, and I've used it many a time before. But recently, I've seen that people are doing all right against this. Like, there's some castles, bishop d6, b3, and now black's playing the strong move queen e7, which stops white from playing bishop a3 in one go. Yeah, stops bishop a3 in one go, so I mean, Avruk is recommending bishop b2, castles, and then queen c1 to organize bishop a3, and I do think white has some chances for an edge in his line. It's definitely a solid recommendation, but it seems like white's wasting a lot of time. So the move I played here is actually b3 first, and the point is, I'm going to be able to play bishop a3 in one go, and there's nothing he can do about it. What he wants to do is play bishop d6 and queen e7. It's not going to happen. If he plays bishop d6, I'll play bishop a3. And if he plays c6, which will stop bishop a3, bishop a3 here would be a blunder, so I want you guys to figure out why. Alright, so if you want more time, pause your videos, we can exchange, and queen a5 check. But white can just castle, and black doesn't have time to set up bishop d6, bishop a3. So bishop d6, I play bishop a3, and he didn't have time to play queen e7. So as a result here, I'm going to get this trade in without having to waste time on some bishop b2, queen c1, which basically is two useless tempos. But I mean, I think that white has much more in this position than he normally would against the stonewall. So, however, I think that black probably should have done something like that. In the game, though, he played the move knight bd7. Now, this move looks very innocent, but I actually think it was a pretty serious mistake. So now white castles. Bishop d6. And here already, because I've come up with a sort of new idea to put a little bit of pressure on my opponent, he's played this knight bd7 move, which was an error. And already here, white just has a route to like a very, very clear advantage that he normally never gets in the stonewall. So my opponent was trying to highlight the drawbacks of the way I was playing by not playing c6. So now, presumably, if I play bishop a3, he's going to ignore it. Or maybe after bishop a3, he'll play something like queen e7. And if I take, he'll take back with the pawn, which helps strengthen his center. So this is maybe some kind of improvement for black, but still I would prefer to be white. However, white has a very strong move here, which is c4. Now, my opponent played c6. Now, okay, I could play bishop a3 here and get sort of to what I was talking about, but white has an even better option than bishop a3. So see if you can figure out what white should play in this position. Alright, so if you want more time, pause your videos. At this point, white is actually able to make the exchange on d5, which is something in the stonewall that's usually not recommended because after e takes d5, we're opening up this bishop. And then black will play knight e4, and he's got the open e-file, and it's almost never something to recommend in the stonewall. However, in this specific case, we're seeing a drawback of knight d7. This will hang the f5 pawn. Seems like a problem. So I would recommend for black to castle in this position instead, to me, to play this way. And I thought I was very scared, like, looking at this position during the game, like some position like this, where I'm up 2 pawns, but the black pieces are very quickly jumping to life. Now, of course, the computer is telling me that I'm on drugs and that white's completely winning. But somehow during the game it looked a little disconcerting. I don't know. I mean, I was thinking of alternate plans here. I was thinking even the move c5, which often is not something you want to do in Stonewall to lock everything, but in this specific case, it pushes the bishop back to a really lousy square, and then white can play b4. And we can start to play on the queen side without having to worry about this bishop on c7, like staring at this guy and preparing for e5. It was a thought, too. Of course, I can take on d5 and then take on f5 as well, or just play bishop a3. In any case, my opponent played c6. But now after c takes d5, again, we're seeing that black can't recapture e takes d5. And we get this position. So I'm not really a big advocate of the exchange Slav. I think it's very unambitious, notwithstanding the fact that I lost to Sokolov, and that's the last video you saw, although I didn't show you the opening. But at this point, white has an incredibly good version of the exchange Slav, because this open c file is just going to belong to white. And black basically has nothing. Like, I mean, we're exchanging the dark-squared bishops, and the black's light-squared bishop is terrible, and white's ready to take the c file very quickly. This knight on d7 is misplaced. So queen e7, takes, queen c2. And now white has the very simple plan of playing rook c1 and queen c7. And black is very hard-pressed to meet this plan. And I think it's because he's under so much pressure and like trying to find stuff that he normally wouldn't have to, that he made a, well, incorrect move here. So he's seeing all this problem on the c-file, so he plays knight b8 with the intention of bringing the knight to c6 to shut down the c-file. And I was tempted to cite a certain American Grandmaster's game at the U.S. Championship, but I decided not to because it would be too rude. But indeed, after queen takes c8 check, black resigned. So it's pretty rare to see an IM hang a piece and lose in 12 moves. But I think that one of the reasons it happened was because I was able to come up with a new idea or something like that, and he wasn't reacting well to having to like be under a little bit of pressure. Now, putting pressure on people can come in a lot of different ways. In this case, I feel I put pressure on him because the position could have just objectively become worse for him, and he was understanding that and realizing he could be in some trouble. But there's also other ways of putting pressure on people, which is to just like give them positions that are hard to play. And I know one American Grandmaster actually played recently in a deathmatch, Grandmaster Robert Hess. He's extremely good at putting pressure on people. Like, I think that like oftentimes you'll see him like, there was a long time where I sort of didn't understand why he was as good as he was. I just felt like people were playing terribly in equal positions and losing. But then when I started to study his games more and I started to play with him more, I was realizing he's just so good at putting pressure on people. And sure enough, you'll see people play moves like knight b8 when they're under pressure. And so yeah, this was one game. Now, I played another game with an IM this tournament where I was white that lasted only a little bit longer. So we'll go over that real quick. d4. G6, okay, obviously not the best move, but we'll just go with it. Knight c3, d6, bishop e3. Okay, so I just sort of developed my pieces. I didn't really feel like playing f4 and e5 and trying to crush him. I just wanted to maintain my center. So my opponent played queen a5 now, bishop e2, knight f6, castles, castles. And here I played a move that I think was very strong because it put my opponent under a lot of pressure. Black, I believe, has two main plans in this position. One is to play b5 to try to activate his bishop. The other is to play e5 to strike back in the center. And with one move, I prevented both of these plans. So let's see if you guys can figure out what that is. Alright, so if you want more time, pause your videos. I would recommend really trying to think this out. But I played the move a4, which is very strong. It stops b5 for obvious reasons. But what my opponent didn't understand is that it actually also stops e5. And now he's under pressure because he thinks to himself, well, if I can't play b5, I have to strike back right away. Here I think already black is probably quite a bit worse. And indeed, my opponent did play e5, not realizing the problem. If he had maybe realized it, I think maybe he'd play a move like rook d8 instead. But it's very good to be able to get your opponent in a position where there's a move that they'd really love to play, and for some subtle and not immediately obvious reason, it's just failing. And that's exactly the case here. And that's the kind of position where they can often just sort of automatically play that move and get themselves into big trouble. So e5 was played here. And white has the route to a very nice advantage. So let's see if you guys can figure out what he should do. Alright, so if you want more time, pause your videos. White actually resolves the tension in the center with d takes e5. And then, okay, black can't really take with the knight because after queen d6... I mean, something like this, black has some compensation, but I do believe white is up a reasonably healthy pawn. I don't know, queen c5 or something. I don't think black has enough. So he had to take back with the pawn, which seems like an achievement for him, but now we see a strong move, knight d2. And white's planning knight c4 to hit this queen and then, like, drop into d6, which would be a serious problem for black. And we're noticing that black's main mechanism to stop this would be b5. That's not happening here. And if he plays knight b6, we have knight b3, and then this queen is getting trapped. So here already, my opponent is under some pressure. And it really showed because he did not find the best move, not by a long shot. The best move for black, I would actually suggest you guys try to pause your videos and find it, was to play rook d8, and then after knight c4, queen c7. And now after queen d6, I thought that white should be quite a bit better here. But after knight e8, which is a very important move, takes, say knight d6, white's definitely better, but how much? I'm not sure. I mean, it's not that easy to improve the position. Let's say knight e6. And I was even considering a move like knight d4 for black here. We'll give up a pawn, but, you know. Sorry, we're on knight b6 now, I think. Yeah, knight b6, and then the bishop moves and knight d4. I was calculating this. No, knight b6, I can't move the bishop. What was I calculating? God, I'm such a doofus. There's something I'm trying to remember here. Oh yeah, I was wanting to play rook d1 for white, which is a little more solid, and then knight d4, and now bishop c4. And I was calculating some line like this, and now knight b6, and okay, we're gambiting this pawn, but, like, get some position like this one. Like, okay, yeah, white's better, he has an extra pawn, but how much? I don't know. His pieces are uncoordinated, this knight on d4 is strong. I think this was black's best option. I think he has very adequate chances to fight back. But instead, my opponent played queen b4. And now after knight c4, I'm still coming into d6. Maybe. And he plays the move rook d8. And I came up with another strong move here that put black under more pressure. I had figured out that if I had played queen d6, he was going to play bishop f8 to get rid of my queen, and then in some position like this, I have to waste a move on something like f3 to protect the e4 pawn. And, okay, maybe black has some chances to hold on here. Like, maybe he plays like knight h5, looking at these tender squares, and, I don't know, rook d1, rook e8, and probably, I mean, white should be better, but maybe black has chances. So, I came up with a strong move that put black under pressure. What I noticed is that this rook, now it's not defended, so he's not actually threatening to move the knight anywhere. What I'd really love to do is sort of like double my queen on the d file and play like rook d1 and like really tie him down so that he has no moves. But we have to figure out how to do that. Because queen d6, he was playing bishop f8. Now the most natural move is queen d2, but I came up with a problem with this move, and that's that black can play the move b6. And he'll get the bishop to a6, which defends the rook and gains the tempo on this knight. And I think that it's not so easy. I would like to play the move knight takes e5, but knight e4 I didn't have an answer to. And takes, and I think the black's probably equalizing. Although now that I'm looking at it, I may have overlooked this move. And takes bishop f3. Maybe. I don't know, I haven't calculated it, although it's possible I overlooked this during the game. In any case, it's at the very least complicated after like queen c7 takes and like knight e5 followed by bishop a6 hitting this and hitting that and hitting lots of stuff. But maybe I overlooked that. Probably black also can just play bishop takes e5 too. Or exchange the queens first, presumably, to not hang the queen, and then... Oh yeah, exchanging the queens just works, because now after something like knight d2, knight e5, black's just bishop e6. Black's absolutely fine. So, that wasn't working. And knight takes e5 here isn't working again on account of knight takes e4. So I came up with a very strong move, queen d3. Now b6 fails to knight takes e5, because knight e4 isn't working. I have knight c6. And I was considering here, you could try bishop a6 to like go like takes and now knight e5 to play like knight c4 business, and queen takes b2 is hanging. But I think that, I'm sure that probably white should have something here. Maybe he can just play rook b1 and play calmly, but then knight takes c4 then. But much easier is to just take this pawn on c6, gaining. And after the queen can't really move away, because then I'll just take on c6 for free, or take on a6 for free. So bishop d3, knight b4. And well, we get some position like this, and okay, I think white's just a healthy pawn ahead. In any case, it shows when you put pressure on your opponents, they can do uninspired stuff. And indeed, my opponent made a bad move here. He played knight h5. Probably he should have played like knight e8, but the position was already very unpleasant. After knight h5, it went takes, rook fd1. And again, my opponent put another uninspired move, bishop f6. He's hoping to move the knight away. And unfortunately, though, white has a really good response here that keeps black from doing anything. Sort of goes back to prophylaxis. So what should white play here? Alright, so the best continuation is bishop h6, which ties off these squares. So the knight can't move. Knight b6, let's say we can just take on d8 with checkmate. And knight f8, again, we take on d8 and takes. And this pin is decisive. We're going to end up with an extra piece. So black is really hard-pressed for moves. He played the move queen e7. And now, after one more strong move, queen f3, it's all over. Black should have played knight f8 here, and then tried to reroute the knight to g6. Of course, after a simple capture of this pawn, he's completely lost. But in the game, he played h4, trying to save the pawn. And now, after rook d6, black just resigned. Point being that he actually just can't move a single piece. Let's start by saying, okay, this bishop can't move on pain of checkmate on g4. Knight can't move because it's defending the bishop. Knight can't move because it's defending the bishop. Rook can't move because the knight's in the way. This bishop can't move because this rook's in the way, and this rook can't move because that bishop's in the way. And this bishop can't move because the knight's in the way. So basically none of black's pieces can move. And what's next move is rook ad1, which only further strengthens the bind. So for example, let's say like rook e8 to try to break that pinch to free the knight after rook d1. Again, like the knight can't move because the bishop is hanging. And if the bishop moves, we have checkmate. So black literally just cannot move a single one of his pieces. If somehow like he could migrate this bishop over the knight to e6, I think his position, he would still be in some trouble, but his position might be tenable because he could actually get his pieces out. But as is, I mean, you just stop all black's pieces from moving. They're going to have no choice but to throw in the towel. In any case, this is sort of an interesting video I did. I usually don't like to cover games that were this quick, but it really struck me that two like IMs, accomplished strong players, were just blundering games away against me when they had never been doing that before. And I think it was because I was putting pressure on them and basically making it so that normal moves for them and that kind of structure were just losing. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, in my first game that I showed, like black was playing this normal knight bd7 move, but it turned out to be a big mistake. And here black was playing this e5, which seemed like the natural move to strike back in the center, but that was also a big mistake. So, you know, it's good when you can get to a point where a normal move on your opponent's end is going to leave him in big trouble. So, and indeed, both my opponents played those two moves very quickly. So, in any case, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. It was a little different than what I normally do, but until next time, this is Sam Shanklin signing off.